Hello and welcome to In a Spiritual Sense, where we discuss all things spiritual. From growing your intuition, speaking with spirit guides, diving into past lives, the paranormal, and more, join me, Stacey Piagno, where we work to bridge the gap between science and spirit. Hello and welcome back to In a Spiritual Sense. I'm your host, Stacey Piagno, and today we are going to dive deep into our intuition, which in all honesty is what we do every week. But this week we are going to talk about a mystical tool that is tied to the intuition that holds the power to draw out and encourage healing, guidance, and inspiration. So what am I talking about? That of the gypsies, fortune tellers, psychics, and common everyday people. And I say this because something that I've become very passionate about is making sure people understand that we are all magical beings. We are all intuitives because that is our natural state. However, it's become so common that this idea of magic or intuition is something that is far-fetched, or it's something that is romanticized and it's only for a select few, or it's only for entertainment. And slowly over time, we have become disconnected with what we now view as magic, disconnected from this space that our ancestors once thrived in. And now we view it as something that is separate from us. And my intent today is to remind you that we all hold magic inside of us because it is magic in which we were created. And therefore it is magic that runs through our veins. And the way to activate it is to trust. Now, when I first describe tarot to people, I think it should be understood that this is a tool made to activate your intuition. And this is just my opinion, but I think the best tarot readers are those who can draw out your own intuition. And I think with practice, the best reader for you is yourself. That's why I'm such a big proponent of teaching yourself how to read and connect with tarot. Now, if you're not interested in learning, or if you just want to go have a good time, then yes, by all means, go see a reader. I've been just for fun and had an amazing time. However, I just want to remind you how magic and intuitive we all truly are. And any answer we need can be found deep within us. And yes, I think at times it is beneficial to seek guidance and inspiration outside of ourselves, as long as we come back to the understanding that the true power radiates from within us, and we have access to it anytime we need. Now, there are lots of different ways to read tarot. Me personally, I do not use tarot to foretell the future. In some ways, I don't fully believe in that because we all have free will and we are all able to see our future any way we choose. I also don't like the idea that we would place our decisions in the hand of what one person says. I think that should be dependent upon the individual themselves. So the way I use tarot is to read energy. And whatever my intention is, whether it be for the day, the week, or the year, I try to grasp onto what kind of energy is going to be present and what are the different paths or choices that I have available. And then I think it's important for the individual themselves to then take a look at this information and then look within when determining how to move forward. So today we are going to talk about tarot. The history, the misconceptions, what does it mean, and how does it all work? Now, as far as I've learned, tarot likely originated in northern Italy in the late 14th or 15th century. And before they were used for any kind of divination tool, they were actually used as playing cards, very similar to the ones that we use today with the four suits. These cards then spread into Europe in the 15th century, and from then, they branched out into becoming a divination tool in France shortly after the Renaissance. So by the 18th century, there were two branches of tarot, one for playing cards and the other for spiritual purposes. Now, if you break down the word tarot, ter means way or path, and ro means king or royal. So it basically stands for the royal path of human life, which, as we're going to get into, is a pretty good description on why you would want to use tarot, to find our highest path in life. And what's interesting is tarot seems to have a lot of connection to Egypt. And from what I understand, the cards themselves were created in Europe, but the meaning of the cards stemmed from Egypt, much of which was from the Egyptian Book of Thoth. There is a really great article written by Mary Kay Greer, and she shares that the images on the cards that represent the path of human life are the Major Arcana cards, which we're going to get into today. But they are used to make us aware of our course of events and their results. And she goes on to describe how the wise men of Egypt used these sacred pictures to predict the future and interpret dreams. In addition to her writings, there is a French oculist named Paul Christian who wrote a book on the magic of Egypt, where he describes the importance of these sacred symbols and how they can be found in the Great Pyramids. And apparently, there is one pyramid where the Sphinx of Gish sits. Hopefully I said that right. There he says, you will see an entrance with a sacred vault containing a long gallery of 22 statues in facing pairs, representing mysterious beings and symbols, which we will soon learn are the 22 major arcana cards. And it is here that the surrounding hieroglyphics explain, quote, I must not hide you that other perils lie in store, but I am allowed to encourage you and give you direction by letting the arcana of tarot explain their symbols, the understanding of which will create in your heart an invulnerable armor. For the science of will, the principle of all wisdom and source of all power, is contained in these 22 arcana or symbolic hieroglyphics. Their attributes conceal a certain meaning, expressing a reality of the divine world, the intellectual world, and the physical world. Each arcanum, made visible and tangible here, is a law of human activity, whose combination produces the phenomena of life. So basically these figures or characters that you see represented in our common day tarot decks date back to Egypt and have sacred meaning for the different layers and elements of life. So how did it all make its way to Europe? Well, it has been said that there was an Egyptian priest who had refined the ancient knowledge of the Egyptian Book of Thoth, and he then brought it to Rome, where it remained in the hands of the popes. Later on, it was the popes who then brought them to France, where it began to spread into the secret societies and mystery schools of the time. And these societies were basically groups of people who were practicing the esoteric. And from there, the world of tarot began to spread. So let's break it down. One of the most popular decks created in 1909 is the Rider-Waite Tarot deck, which was created by author Edward Waite and illustrated by Pamela Coleman Smith. And this is the deck that I personally own, and there's tons of different versions of this deck, but it's a very traditional deck, and there's lots of layers of meaning incorporating Greek mythology, numerology, there's Egyptian influences, and the layers seem to just go on forever. So basically, there's lots of ways to pull meaning. And honestly, even if you have no idea what these cards mean, just picking one up and deciphering for yourself is such a great way to determine what is on your mind and heart, which in my opinion is one of the biggest reasons why we use tarot, to find out what is on our mind, to find blockages, inspiration. It's made to help us reflect on ourselves and pull out anything that we may need. And so if you have yet to learn the progression of the sacred symbology within tarot, just pick up a card and see what jumps out at you. At its most basic form, it reminds me of when somebody's going to see a therapist and you're looking at ink spots to determine what's on your mind. It's kind of that idea. But today we are going to be breaking down the meaning of this deck, and it should be pretty much the same as all other tarot decks. And it starts with the understanding of two groups, the Major Arcana and the Minor Arcana. Now, the Major Arcana, which is what we're going to get into today, are the 22 cards that were previously mentioned in the Egyptian Book of Thoth and the Egyptian tombs. And these are the cards that define how energy travels. So it's more of a spiritual progression of one's life. The Minor Arcana, on the other hand, are split into 4 suits, which we're going to get into next week. But these cards are used for determining more day-to-day mundane energies. So today we're going to start with the Major Arcana cards. Now, each one of these holds a special character archetype representing a specific energy. And they are read from start to finish as a progression of one's spiritual path. And the first card we are going to start with today is the Fool. And for those of you listening on the podcast, if you want to see some visuals of these cards, go and hop on over to my YouTube channel, and I'm going to be pulling the cards as we go through them. So the Fool is our starting point. And when determining the meaning of the Major Arcana cards, you can think of it as the evolution of the Fool himself. So as the Fool is on his path, he is going to meet these different characters that are going to help guide him and shape him, similar to how we are guided and shaped throughout our lives. So if you ever pull a Major Arcana card in a reading, if you are familiar with the story of the Fool, it's going to help you determine the meaning of the card. And one last thing I forgot to mention before we dive in is the significance of laying out these Major Arcana cards in order. So for those of you who have cards right now, I would recommend going to grab them. Or for those of you who are going to be buying your own tarot deck, go ahead and come back to this part whenever you do buy them. Because what I want you to do is lay your cards out in 3 rows of 7, excluding the Fool card. Because with this, there is going to be so much symbology. But the most basic representation of the 3 rows is that it is a symbol for the body layer, the mind layer, and the spiritual layer. Also, if I bring it back to the Egyptian hieroglyphics, it states in there, quote, "Their attributes conceal a certain meaning, expressing the reality of the divine world, the intellectual world, and the physical world." So again, the spiritual, mental, and physical realms. So if you have your rows laid out, now let's go through the journey that the Fool is about to embark on, where he will come across different energies that will help shape his life. Also keep in mind, for each card that is pulled, there is also a duality to it. So for example, depending on how some readers will connect with their tarot cards, if you get a card that's pulled in reversed, which we're going to get into more next week, it could be the opposite meaning of that card. So starting with the Fool himself. This card represents our unconsciousness. And it carries with it a somewhat naive energy, as it is about to take a dive into the unknown. It's all about new beginnings, and it's the birth of some kind of transformation that is about to occur. So basically anything new that we might be starting. As the Fool begins his journey, he then comes across the Magician, which is the alchemist within us all. The Magician is a reminder that we are the creators of our life, and by using the 4 elements, earth, air, water, and fire, we can shape our path however we choose. But the flip side is perhaps we are out of control with our alchemy, or perhaps we are unbalanced with some of these elements. We have lost our understanding of how to create. So this card is the representation of full potential as we dive into the start of creating something new. Next on his journey, the Fool comes across the High Priestess. And she helps the Fool connect with his intuition and inner knowledge. She shows the Fool the importance of balance, which you can see is represented by her sitting between those black and white pillars, which represents the mediation of opposites. And so from here, the Fool learns to trust his own intuition as he balances both light and dark. After his time with the High Priestess, the Fool then moves on to card number 3, which is the Empress. And it is the Empress that carries the energy of our Great Mother. She is a nurturer to our mental and physical selves, as well as to those outside of us. She brings abundance while teaching the Fool how to take responsibility for our world and the environment by responding with care to all that surrounds us. Next comes the Emperor, which is represented by card number 4. And we know in numerology that the number 4 is all about structure and foundation. And while on one hand, the Emperor can teach us about structure and control, it may very well be these things that sometimes become overproduced as well. So at times, we might either need to tone down our authority, or we might need to take more of an initiative and more charge. So the Emperor can come out in either of these situations. Moving on to the 5th card, the Fool now comes across the Hierophant, which can sometimes be thought of as the masculine version of the High Priestess. And the Hierophant is symbolic for the Fool's spiritual teacher or mentor. So at this time in the Fool's life, he is called to lean into his beliefs and ethics. It's all about adopting customs that fit your need. Next, the Fool meets the Lovers, which pretty literally refers to love, partnership, and union. And the Lovers card does not have to mean that it's a romantic partnership either. It could be things that refer to your family, your friends, your coworkers, etc. But the Lovers card is all about relationships and equal partnerships. It's what makes us feel strong and healthy, whole and harmonious. So here the Fool learns how to have open communication and a shared vision. From there, the Fool reaches the last card on the physical plane, which is card number 7, the Chariot. And the Chariot represents action and pursuit. So it's all about harnessing your energy to achieve whatever it is that you desire. Here, the Fool learns about willpower. He also learns about achievement. And he learns that there are times when he might need to create boundaries to help strengthen the direction of whatever it is he has chosen. And while he is in pursuit, he of course must remember to stay balanced. So those are the first 7 cards of the Fool's journey, which again represent that foundational body layer of one's path. Moving on, the Fool is next met with Strength, which depicts a woman gently taming a lion. And although this card signifies courage and quite literally our strength, due to the feminine aspect of this illustration, it's more connected to our inward-facing strength versus that of the outward. It's about having a healthy balance and attitude towards any fears that we may encounter, and looking within to really build our confidence. So as you can see from the woman on the card, force is not needed to prove her strength against the lion. She tames the lion with confidence, thus harnessing her energy in a purposeful way. So here the Fool learns about his inner strength. Next, on the mental layer, the Fool comes across the Hermit. And the hermit is depicted as an old man wearing a cloak, and he's walking through the dark of night or the fog. And it is the hermit that teaches the Fool, at times it is best to go into solitude and reflect on our thoughts, feelings, and influences. He teaches the Fool there is value in introspection, and at times it is best to get away from the ongoing stimuli that is ever so present in our world. And through the darkness of this solitude will emerge wisdom and knowledge. Moving on to card number 10, the Fool is next presented with the Wheel of Fortune, which is symbolic of good luck as one continues to move forward in motion. However, the Fool will learn the need to be flexible, as everything in life is fluid and ever-changing. There will always be ups and downs, which is represented in the wheel as it rolls around and around. Hence the karmic connection of what goes around comes around. So the Fool is beginning to understand the inner workings of karma in this card as well. Next, the card of Justice. So here, the Fool learns about reason, fairness, and law. Perhaps after experiencing some karma from his previous destination, the Fool would now like to learn how to balance it. Perhaps balance comes from forgiveness. Maybe the Fool needs to forgive himself. Perhaps he needs to forgive others. This card is all about truth, as it asks us to take an honest look within when determining between feeling and thought, intuition and evidence. So here the Fool learns the importance of finding balance before making an important decision. As the Fool continues on his journey, he is next presented with the Hangman, which to some sounds a little scary. And along with the Devil card and the Death card, I think these are three of the most misunderstood cards in the entire deck. So I want to take a quick time out to break some misconceptions. First off, in no way do any of these cards actually represent one dying or getting haunted by a spirit. I mean, yes, that could technically be an interpretation, but this perspective is honestly something that has a very fear-based foundation, and that's just not how spirit speaks to us. I will say in part, a lot of the fear-based ideas stem from a really old school way of life where there was a conflict between the power of church and the common day healers, which we got into on our Halloween episode. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of these symbols have been taught in a way that holds a lot of fear, and this fear has been preserved through a lack of understanding. But here's my question. Why would someone try to scare us about life? What kind of teaching and healing does that hold? Because in reality, when speaking to spirit or your angels or your guides, it's done in a very loving way, not fear-based at all. And from my perspective, it seems that all of these fear-based ideas and teachings come from us, humanity. And with the way history has unfolded and this conflict stemming from people wanting control, many fear-based teachings still linger within our systems. So we have to teach ourselves how to recenter our power and create a better understanding of some of these old mindsets. Now, am I saying that there is no such thing as dark energy? Well, no, because there is duality in life. So if there is good, then there is bad. But what I'm saying is, I do think there needs to be a revamping of our understanding with symbology and our understanding of how spirit speaks. So starting with the Hangman, although some might say he's being lynched, that's just not the case. The symbolism here is showing us that a new perspective is needed. And for the record, he is not being hung by his neck, he is being hung by his foot, meaning his head is upside down so that he can acquire a new view. And that's why he has that bright light surrounding his head, because it's showing that now he has a new idea. So, as the Fool comes across the Hangman on his journey, it is because he is in need of a new viewpoint. He needs to be pulled from his current mindset. In addition, this card also means that one could be presented with a crossroads, and maybe they need to pause until a solution presents itself. So here the Fool learns these lessons. Now, as the Fool continues with his new perspective, he is then met with card number 13, dun dun dun, death. And no, he is not going to die. The death card simply means that there will be a renewing of a cycle or a big change that will occur. And the problem here is not necessarily that the change is occurring, it's that we don't like change because it's scary and it's discomforting. And discomfort is often thought of something that's negative. And when things end, we get sad because the ending of something means the destruction of it. It no longer is. But let's talk about destruction. Follow me for a minute. Pretend you are making a paper airplane and you get done folding it and you think it's the best thing that you've ever made and you've worked so hard on it and you go outside to take it for a spin. It's a beautiful day, the wind's blowing, and you reach back and you throw that paper airplane and it falls straight to the ground. It's not aerodynamic at all. And you put all of this work into it and now you're upset that you have to go back to the drawing board and start all over. And the solution to this problem is that the plane needs to change because in order for it to have a smooth, prosperous path, it must first be broken down and deconstructed. And yes, it will cause discomfort and what feels like backtracking. And now you have become impatient because we like when things work out the first time with no friction. But sometimes life moves differently. Life moves in cycles, whether it be big phases of our lives or small mundane tasks or the mindsets that we carry. Endings bring beginnings, and cycles bring growth, and growth then brings abundance. And sometimes the beginnings we need are through the destruction of something else. So the death card means change is needed or change will be happening. And if one can learn to move fluidly, you may see that change is good because we should be continuously changing. That means we're fluid and we're evolving. And sometimes the death card is the best card to pull. For example, I remember a little over a year ago, me and my partner were looking to buy a house and the market was so competitive and it was honestly becoming a nightmare. And we had put in an offer for like the 10th time and we finally got a call back that we were in the running with 2 other families for this house that we really, really wanted. And it had been some time since we got a call back and I was starting to get anxious. And so I go over to my tarot bag and I'm praying really hard for a message. And I'm like, please just give me some guidance or like, let me know what's going on with this house. And I pulled one card out and it was the death card. And I immediately started jumping up and down because I knew that change was here. And I kid you not, about an hour later, we got a call back from the seller and they said that we got the house. So I was like, yes. Change is good. And sometimes we want it and sometimes we don't, but it's the only thing that's constant in life. So the sooner we can connect with that, the sooner we will glide through life. So bringing it back to the Fool. The death card he comes across is all about a rebirthing of some sort. And after the Fool's rebirthing and his new perspective, he comes across the last card on the mental level, which is card number 14, Temperance. And it is this card that is very symbolic of balance. So you can see there's a woman and she has 2 cups and she's pouring the water back and forth and she's got 1 foot on land and 1 foot in the water. And here the Fool learns that he will need moderation and self-control when moving forward on his path. So she teaches him that life is full of gray areas. And although it can be difficult to stay in that middle lane, nothing in life is ever black and white. So if this appears in a reading, it might be beneficial to think about what is too much in your life and then look at how you can balance that out. So at this point, the Fool has now endeavored through the physical and mental realms, and he is now on his way to the spiritual layer. So starting us off hot, very, very hot, we are first greeted by none other than the devil, which is symbolic for the things that we are attached to that do not serve us. It could be anything that causes temptation, anything that takes our power away and places it in something exterior. And I think sometimes the hardest realization when pulling this card is that one might not yet be able to admit what his or her attachment is. A lot of times what we need is a deep reflection on what is giving us this short-term happiness. Because if we're placing our happiness in something that is external from ourselves, that means without that thing, we are unhappy. And the thing about the devil card is those who are being affected are there on a voluntary basis. So they are free to remove their chains at any time. You just have to want your freedom more than what you're attached to. Similar in life when we are driven by material attachments. And I think it's pretty fitting that this card is the first step onto the spiritual level, because in order for the Fool to continue ascending, he must release all that holds him back. Because it is the attachment in our material world that often does cause us suffering. And the devil itself is a symbol for our mental suffering caused by our attachment. Again, we are free to leave anytime we want. We just have to give up that thing that we're being attached to. So if this card is ever pulled, I would look within to see what kind of behaviors or patterns or maybe addictions you may have, and then work to release them. So as the Fool begins to work on his temptations, he is then struck down by the power of the Tower. And it is the Tower card that gives the Fool a moment of realization that changes everything. And as you can see on this card, the Tower is being struck down by lightning, which is symbolic of the hand of God. And quite purposefully, having lightning, which represents fire, strike down the Tower can be a metaphor for the life that comes after destruction. And in my opinion, this is one of the last deeply rooted shadow cards, and it is presented as the Fool begins to strip away his ego and climb out of that dark, heavy space. And by having gone down to the depths of his pain, he now holds an experience that will help him see through any future delusions that he may be presented with. Similar to the deconstruction of that paper airplane, the Tower is symbolic of needed reconstruction that brings about a new foundation. So, as you can imagine, the Fool has been a little beat up by now. He has had his whole world thrown upside down, for the better, let me remind you, and he now passes the Star, which holds much needed comfort for the Fool. And it is the Star that is full of potential possibilities. However, the Fool can only access these possibilities by trusting the universe and having faith that he is right where he needs to be. Similar to wishing on a star or following the North Star, this card also gives the Fool direction and purpose. It's the Fool's guiding light, comfort, and relief. Moving on to card number 18, the Fool now encounters the Moon, which, as in real life, is very symbolic for our emotions, dreams, and the subconscious. Existing in a state of darkness, the Moon teaches the Fool how to lean into his intuition and learn how to work with his emotions truthfully and fully. And it is at this stage that the Fool becomes inspired to search for deeper meaning. Next, he is greeted by the Sun, which is said to be the most positive card in the entire deck. It is a yes card, and it's vibrant. It holds healing, clarity, and new life. And opposite from the Moon, diving into the subconscious and one's intuition, the Sun represents consciousness. It's all about alignment and purpose, and it is here that the Fool learns complete optimism. As he gets closer to the end of his enlightenment, the Fool is then presented with the Judgment card. And this is a call of action to look within and truthfully take responsibility for anything else that may need attention. So basically, this is a reflection step to make assessments. And if met truthfully, the Fool will then make his way to the last card of his journey, which is the World. And it is here where the Fool feels wholeness, peace, and complete open-mindedness. The World represents a new beginning and a new perspective that has developed from all the experience previously lived by the Fool. He is now grounded in reality, yet able to access what is beyond his immediate perception. He is at home anywhere, thus ready to begin the rebirthing process once more. So, that, my friends, is the journey of the Fool and the meaning of our Major Arcana cards. So you can see how this path of royalty or path of enlightenment holds these archetypal energies that are present and existent throughout life. And using this energy and symbolism to help us on our path is a tool that is right here at our fingertips. And the more you work with it, the more intuitive you will become and the more conscious you will be as you move through your path. So that was less than half the deck. We're going to take a break and we're going to meet back next week to discuss our Minor Arcana cards and how they connect to the 4 elements of life. And for those of you who are serious about tarot, take this week to work with your Major Arcana cards. Lay them out in rows of 7, excluding the Fool, and connect with the story, because I think it's such a great way to begin using tarot and to understand the energies that are present throughout life. So with that, we have tons more to discuss, but it will have to wait until you have digested all of this juicy information that has been passed down from history. For those who enjoyed this week's episode, I hope you use it to inspire those around you, and I will see you next week on In a Spiritual Sense.
For those looking to connect further, please feel free to send emails to info@inaspiritualsense.com or hit me up on Instagram at spiagno, that is SPIAGNO, where you can find weekly inspiration and updates. I look forward to connecting with you.